Good afternoon, everybody. Oh, I'm in a weird shadow. Let me see if I can move this so that you can see me. There, that's a little bit better. Here, I'll lean forward. Not trying to create a mood effect. Hopefully it'll pass as soon as the sun moves a few minutes over to the west. So good afternoon. I'll call this meeting to order. We'll start with our pending motion to approve the following special rule that each speaker is limited to 2 minutes each time they're recognized. Host, if you could please initiate the poll on this rule.
May I ask a point of information?
Yes, Scott, thank you, please.
So I am on the agenda later down, and or an item that I am involved in proposing is included later down in the agenda. When we presented this item for the first time in June, we were not allowed to directly present it, and therefore we were not allowed to directly respond to questions. Questions from the floor built up to 4 or 5 questions at a time, and only then were we allowed to respond. If there is a 2-minute speaking limit, if I felt that it was, I felt that it was suboptimal and a little unfair for the way this was handled in June. When Teddy was here with the statement from EAD, questions were asked from the floor. She was allowed to directly respond. If questions are to be stacked up for us again, as they were in June, and then we are to then only be given 2 minutes to respond, I think that would be unfair and would not best serve the discussion. So I would ask if this rule is to be adopted, I'll ask for an assurance now that either Mattia Allert or I will be immediately recognized to respond to every question, and that we will not have the situation that happened in June where 4 and 5 questions were allowed to stack up and only then we were allowed to respond under the 2-minute limit.
So my understanding, there's 2 things that I'll present for the body's consideration as you vote on the special rule in recognition of the point raised by Scott Petty. One is that with questions, it's in the chair's discretion regarding the 2-minute rule. We would ask for it to be honored as much as the circumstances allow, but obviously we want to have a robust discussion. And the second is that in any case, the maximum is 3 minutes, even if we don't have this rule. So it's not 2 minutes or endless. But the 2-minute rule, we can exercise discretion. And Scott, if you become concerned during that period, you're more than welcome to raise that point in the chat. If we lose track, we just want to make sure we keep the meeting moving and strike that balance of an open and robust discussion and timeliness.
Thank you, President Gable.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other questions or discussion? Okay, so just as a reminder, the pending motion is to limit speech to 2 minutes as you're recognized. Host, if you could initiate the poll.
We go about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 142 ayes, 5 nays, and 5 abstentions, the motion prevails.
Okay, thank you. Item 2 concerns administrative responses to Senate actions and is presented for information. Item 3 is a list of recent faculty, staff, and student deaths that have been forwarded for announcement to the Senate. If from where you're watching, you would like to rise, if you can, or otherwise honor those, I'll read the names for our community. Thelma Anderson, Betty Davidson, Warren Eckel Jr., Catherine Grimes, Kenneth Hastings, John Hine, Robert Holt, Christopher Hruza, Thomas Jutanen, Rosalie Kane, Robin Kilberry, Helen Kivnick, Yuling Lean, Linda Lokensgaard, Maria Lopez, Karen Mortensen, Kakambi Nagaraja, Andy Wynn, Robert Paulus, Stan Pride, Kirk Raymond, Ann Reddles, David Max Schmeling, Lanny Schmidt, Michael Schmidt, Byron Shepard, David Swanson, Donald Uden, Vilis Vikmanis, Carol Vamoff, Mary Winstead, Bill Woles, Ann Yeska, and amongst our students, Alexander Johnson, Michael Joey Lynch, Wesley Moschke, Kyle McCasey, Mason Slam. If there's someone you think we missed, please let us know and we'll be sure to include in the next reading. Okay, item 4 is approval of minutes from the several meetings of the University and Faculty Senates between April and October. This motion is to approve them all in one package. Is there any discussion? Questions? Okay, host, if you could initiate the poll.
You have about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote on this item. And last call. There being 154 ayes, 0 nays, and 8 abstentions, the motion prevails.
Thank you. Item 5 is approval of minutes from the special faculty meeting on June 9th, 2020. Only members of the Faculty Senate should vote on this motion. Are there any questions or discussion? Okay, host, if you could initiate the poll.
About 10 more seconds. And last call. There being 90 ayes, 1 nay, and 15 abstentions, the motion prevails.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is my report. So it's very nice to see you all. I'm sorry again for the weird lighting. I've moved a couple of times while we were talking and it must be something with the afternoon sun. So hopefully it passes soon. I apologize for the distraction. It's nice to see all of you virtually and I hope that you're all healthy, safe, and well. With our recent election and the continued updates and conversations in the way that these last 48 hours have been a proxy for what life is like these days in terms of uncertainty and anxiety. I can offer that there are several university events related to the election that may be helpful, informative for you, friends, family, and students to refer to. They're all listed, the ones we are aware of, on the university events calendar. If you know of something that you would like listed and didn't see there, please let us know. There's only omission due to lack of information. And tonight, our own CLA professor, Catherine Pearson, will review the national and local landscape at 7 p.m. this evening online if you're interested. So hopefully, I'm sure that will be excellent, and hopefully we'll all know more soon, very soon, one would hope. So I have, of course, a series of other updates to share with you, and I will start, of course, with COVID-19 and where we are. So as we cross from October to November, I want to thank each and every one of you, faculty, staff, and students, for being so resilient, for adapting, for pushing forward. The landscape seems to change a little less frequently these days, but it is still changing frequently. And I know many of you had to make plans and then make them again and again, and you did it. And here we are, still functioning in ways that I think we can be very proud of across all of the attributes of the university's mission. I know I'm extremely proud. You won't hear me say things like this very often, but in many ways, the absence of significant COVID news is good news. We would prefer not to identify good news as the absence of bad news, but in this case, I really think that applies. We have had very, very few cases. We would prefer zero, but until we have a vaccine, zero is somewhat impossible to attain. So within this landscape, we have had very few cases. We have had no surges or clusters from the public health point of view. We have no evidence of a classroom transmission or a lab transmission. So we're very grateful, because that doesn't happen accidentally. It comes because people are following the public health guidance. Students in particular are making sacrifices about their activities and behaviors that they would like to engage in, and we're very, very grateful. But we are clear-eyed because we know that things are still continuing to change, especially locally. We're working very closely with the governor's office and the Department of Health, as well as partnered with the other higher education institutions in our state to really think about our layered public health approach and pivoting, adapting, being flexible as information becomes available and our understanding deepens. We are very concerned about the trends nationally here, internationally, particularly in Europe, and right next door in our neighboring communities, with hospitalizations that are climbing, and concern about maximizing or utilizing, overwhelming our capacity. We're not there yet, but we are paying very close attention, and we share your concern. 18 to 24-year-olds who were surging so dramatically on other campuses to our east and west and to our south, all around us, have not been the problem age group in the communities where all of the 6 counties where our campuses are located. And actually, for the bulk of the semester, after a very small initial uptick, the numbers were going down. They're not going down anymore. They're relatively stable, but it's very possible that they will go back up as everything is going back up right now, despite the fact that the masks are being worn and in large part social distancing and other preventive steps are being undertaken. So we're watching the data really closely, and we'll think about what this means for the Sunrise Plan if the data changes. Our best prevention has been the behavioral prevention plan that we've been using on campus. When I am on campus, I see masks and distancing, and I'm grateful because I know it's not a lot of fun. And we've also added to our testing plan, as you all know. We have the M-Test plan, which is the plan that we developed with MDH for people who are symptomatic or known exposures. But the governor partnered with us. We're very grateful to him to direct some of the federal CARES Act money to make the mail order testing available that he made available for K through 12 faculty and staff. So faculty and staff on campus now have access to that. And just a couple of days ago, we were able to finalize the contract that the university itself has for students. So the governor is supporting the testing for faculty and staff, or the expenses associated therewith, and the university is supporting for students, because we want to make sure that it's for our whole community. So that was a little out of sync for a couple of days there, but now we're up and rolling. The M-Test program, for those of you who are concerned about symptoms or know that you're exposed, is still the best way to test in those cases. The mail order test is an absolutely legitimate test, but it takes a couple of days to receive it and a couple of days to send it back. And I would use that for if you're just concerned in general, just by virtue of the uncertainty and anxiety that these times offer. If you think that there is actual reason for concern, go get an M-Test. It's there for you. We've moved it from Boynton to Reckwell in light of the data that's emerging around us, and expanded the staffing So you really should be able to get in as soon as you need to get in and get the test if you want or need the test. So please take advantage of that. Moving ahead, the testing landscape across the country and here in Minnesota is likely to shift. The tests are getting cheaper, more readily available. There are tests awaiting approval, like the tests that we have the mail order code for that don't require a clinician supervision. The more that time passes, the more available these resources will be, and we'll adjust and assess and pivot. I hate that word now, but we'll do what we need to do to meet the availability of those resources where they are so that we can keep our campus as safe as possible. We're also thinking ahead to the end of the face-to-face portion of the fall semester, which is at the Thanksgiving break. And as you know, after Thanksgiving, everything will be virtual. That is a risky moment of travel and being around groups of people you haven't been around before. We're starting an information campaign that we developed in partnership with MDH. You'll see it in today's email message from me, and you'll see several more regularly over the next few weeks before those of us who might travel for the Thanksgiving holidays or during this time of year anticipate doing so. So that information's coming. It was developed in partnership, and it should clarify any questions or uncertainty that people have about how to assess the risk of the holiday season. So a couple of other things that I want to make you aware of. So the budget, always our favorite topic. Clearly, the pandemic affects our budget, as does everything else going on right now. Your finance teams are working really hard to evaluate and anticipate some of the challenges that we might be facing. As you know, we got ahead of some of these challenges with great appreciation to all of you for the temporary salary reduction. We also, as you know, pulled the raises for this year off of the table. We are still in the hiring freeze, and we did an incentivized early retirement program. All those things help a lot. There are also different forms of what our finance colleagues would call natural savings, although as many of you have pointed out to me, not all savings are created equal, and some result in operational savings and some actually don't. But net, there are some things associated with so many of us not being on campus and not traveling that are in some ways a savings that has helped us get to where we are now, where we haven't had to do anything beyond what we've discussed with you. But the situation is not resolving yet. And so we have to look ahead to what is likely to happen for the remainder of this budget cycle, and the distinct possibility that state support for the university will be affected by their revenue shortfalls and the absence of reserves because they've already deployed so much of that asset. So I want to bring up for the first time, but not the last time, the temporary salary reduction conversation. Just as a reminder, on June 9th at the Senate meeting, the faculty approved a temporary salary reduction for the 2020-2021 academic year with a note. This was the language of the approval. The president may, at her discretion, end the reduction after 6 months if the financial situation of the university improves sufficiently. So over the next month, in consultative committees and at our December 3rd meeting, I'll let you know how that discretion will be exercised. But I want to bring it up now because it's not looking that great. Nobody's probably surprised to hear me say that in all likelihood, the temporary salary reductions would continue, but I want to make sure we fully utilize shared governance and input and consultation in between. So think about who you would like to have in a consultative committee meeting or in other types of consultation, what kind of information or data you all would like to see in order to be sure that the decision is an informed one based on the appropriate data points. And I want everybody to feel comfortable with the decision if that's the decision that's ultimately made. So this is just more of a marker. The more robust discussion will happen in December, and we can certainly talk about that in Q&A or offline afterwards if you would like to. So the next thing, as the fall semester winds down and we start to look ahead, I want to bring up spring semester. So Provost Croson isn't with us today, but I do want to give a summary on her behalf of some of the decisions around spring semester. So first of all, the provost announced the expansion of SN grading to support students in Crookston, Duluth, Morris, Rochester, and Twin Cities. Everyone agreeing to similar measures. On October 5th, we held a special University Faculty Senate meeting also to discuss spring break and plans for the spring semester. Those went a little differently, campus by campus. Twin Cities and Rochester moved their spring break to the week of April 5th, which you all voted to approve. Morris modified their spring break by spreading the days through the semester, and Duluth and Crookston essentially did the same thing. So spring modality is being planned in the same way that fall was, where faculty have flexibility in how to offer their classes and students have flexibility in selecting classes as much as possible. This worked in the fall, especially once we got going. We've learned a lot and ironed out a lot of the wrinkles, including, I'll remind you as you're making your choices, no known classroom transmission. So we would like to have a nice, robust portfolio of options according to what makes you comfortable. And we're listening to medical advice and watching the data and trends to make sure that this is all going well and is informed as new information becomes available. And I thank you again for your patience and your flexibility and your feedback and your creativity and your really hard work, because I know it's been much more than any of us bargained for. So a few other bits of news. So I'll do good news because we all could use it. So three important external developments. So the Minnesota Senate joined the House in passing the 2020 Capital Investment Bonding Bill, which was then signed into law by Governor Walz. So what a pleasant surprise. So what does this bill do? The bill contained about $75 million in capital support for the U. And then it also provided us authority to refinance some existing debt that we hold and then use those savings ourselves rather than having them revert to the state. And the use for those savings is to support the design, site acquisition, and pre-construction of a clinical research facility down on that side of campus. So we're really grateful. There are some funds in there for HEAPR, which is maintenance, some funds for the chemistry building, funds for the Institute of Child Development, and then funds for A.B. Anderson in Duluth. So we're very, very pleased to have those projects available to us for the quality of the programs that we offer in those spaces, the clinical care we provide, the jobs it will create, and the optimism that it creates that we continue to invest in our infrastructure. So we are very grateful. The second thing is, late last month, the U.S. Department of Defense announced the awarding of a new Manufacturing Innovation Institute called BioMADE. It's supported by $87.5 million from DoD, which was matched with $180 million in cost sharing from non-federal sources. So BioMADE will be housed in St. Paul on the Twin Cities campus, pending Board of Regents approval, which should happen at the December meeting. It's an incredible B12 shot into our bioindustrial manufacturing ecosystem for us, for the region, new collaborations, spinoffs, jobs. It really is tremendous, and hats off to a lot of people, including Valerie Forbes and Chris Kramer and everyone on their respective teams who stepped in on this. It's just really wonderful news and couldn't come at a better time. Similarly and related, on October 16th, the university was proud to support the launch of MBOLD. MBOLD is a coalition of statewide food and agriculture leaders aimed at advancing solutions to pressing food and agricultural challenges. So this is us, all of the commercial enterprises here in the state of Minnesota, and there are so many around food and agriculture. It's some of our sustainability advocates and environmentalists and the farmers. So really excited to be a part of this. I'm personally the soil health and water stewardship champion. So as we work to evaluate this important work, it puts us right next to where we would want to be in order to advance the fact that this region can be a world leader. We can serve locally and impact globally with the multifaceted know-how that we have here. The next thing I want to share with you is the status of the system-wide strategic plan. So in June, the board approved the university's first ever system-wide strategic plan, which we call MPACT 2025. And you all were very gracious consultants on that plan and provided incredible feedback. And we're very pleased that we're at the point where we are, and amidst everything else that everyone is coping with. So the phase that we're in right now is developing the metrics associated with that plan. Some of you may know that the board has been using metrics for 7 or 8 years now that they call the Maroon and Gold Progress Card. That card was obviously developed sort of as a standalone since there was no strategic plan to associate it with, and it has been tweaked but never really formally updated since then. The idea is that now that we have a plan, we have commitments and goals and action items, that we should also be measuring whether we're moving towards fulfilling those goals. And so at the board's request, and a request that we agreed with, we are updating the Maroon and Gold Progress Card. And we talked this through at length with the board at their October meeting, but we're treating this as if it is our campus's card, and the board is seeking our consultation and input in the development of those measures. So we are consulting much in the way we did with the underlying plan itself. I'll provide more detail at the December 3rd meeting, but there are interim consultations happening with each of the vice presidents, bringing it to their appropriate committees and at other governance points. But in the meantime, there's a link up on the president's website. If you want to go there to individually provide feedback, we would be extremely grateful to receive it, because it makes no sense for us to develop metrics that don't actually tie into what we consider important, or that don't feed into the core of what we're trying to accomplish. So really grateful there. But even though we don't have the metrics yet, some of the things that we have in the strategic plan and that we were planning to do anyway are underway, and I want to give you some updates on that. So first, on October 22nd, with many of you in active participation or attendance, we had a statewide mental health summit, first of its kind, in partnership with Minnesota State. Minnesota private colleges were there.
I see.
Our tribal college counterparts were there. We had 700 plus participants, students, faculty, staff, elected officials, members of the board from the U and from Minnesota State. We had a keynote from my friend, Sarah Abelson, who's a national leader in the field of student mental health. Kaz Nelson was our facilitator. Many of you with your robust subject matter expertise facilitated our various breakout sessions. It was a wonderful day to talk about an incredibly difficult topic. It's hard to have those two things go together in that way. I was invigorated by seeing all of us come together in this way. It's how we will get better at serving our students. It's how we will get better at doing the scholarship around underlying cause. It's how we will all get better, because of course, this is a mental health challenge time for everybody, faculty and staff, of course, as well. So more to come on that as we debrief from the summit itself and start to pull the lessons learned into a mental health initiative, which I'll bring forward before you in the weeks and months ahead. We also have in the strategic plan language around safety. And this language was there already, but in the recent months when and how we as a community have come together after George Floyd's tragic death, we've really been thinking about what safety means in its multifaceted definition. One is, of course, things like emergency response and crime reduction, and what that means from a sort of two-dimensional definitional point of view around safety. And then also what it means to feel safe, to feel welcome, and to recognize and acknowledge that there are policies and practices that disproportionately harm our BIPOC community members. So we here on the Twin Cities campus have been working with the University of Minnesota Police Department, which continues to serve our campus community and is excellent, but recognizes that it and we can always continuously improve all the time, no matter what, but especially now, So this is a very challenging problem, a very challenging issue, and we are humbly seeking subject matter expertise assistance to help us pull together how to do this in the best possible way to serve our community and to make our community safe in every way we would define that word. So after a lot of consultation with colleagues around the country, we identified a consultant to help us, Cedric Alexander, and we announced his partnership in August. So he's a really strong academic and civic leader He has a deep knowledge of law enforcement. His scholarly training is in psychology and community engagement, and he has a track record of being involved in several social moments that have translatable impact on what we're working with now, and we think can offer us really deep guidance on how to do this well in response to the calls for action that you all have made in different ways and from different groups, both on campus and in the community at large. So he's about, give or take halfway done. He's not on a deadline per se, but he's met with about 200 university community members, students, faculty, staff, Senate committees, and additional groups who either were invited or expressed interest in participating, senior leaders in their teams, some of our off-campus partners. He's going to submit a report with recommendations that we'll share broadly, and that will inform how we respond in final to the task force addressing institutional racism that was proposed and approved from the EAD Senate Committee. And you'll see that in our response to EAD's statement. In the administrative responses. You may not be surprised to hear, and you may find it interesting that I just had the AAU president's meeting. There are a lot of other universities doing different versions of this work. Harvard, UC Irvine, Northwestern Emory, the University of Iowa, St. Paul Mayor Melvin Carter is doing some work in this area. The Minnesota Business Partnership has created a task force in this area. All of us are talking to each other locally and nationally. And we are at the table as full participants in this work. We are willing to ask ourselves hard questions, but we want to take the time to consultatively listen and develop answers to those questions that allow us to move forward to this collective desire, although I know we interpret it and feel it in different ways for safe campus in every definition of that word. So I appreciate it because I know this is a point of very high passion for many of us, incredibly important work, and I want you to understand where I'm coming from on it and where my commitments are on it. So in closing, let me get to the right part of my notes. I know that life is very challenging right now, and personal life is very challenging right now. And I was at an event this morning where this was, someone called it the election hangover without the fun party. That resonated with me. You're dealing with children at home or doing remote schoolwork or both, and back and forth, aging parents, I'm in that space, family members, and you're here and you're serving our students and you're serving your own creativity and scholarship. And I'm humbled and honored by all of you and the work you're doing. It gives me optimism, not that we'll be out of this tomorrow, but that we will be out of it, and that we will be proud of the work that we did and the way that we did it, and that we will be the university we want to be, if not better, when we get to the other side of this and look back on it historically. So I'll stop there and conclude my report and move to the next item, which is your questions for me. We didn't receive any in advance, so I'm happy to take questions from the floor. If you want to put your name into the chat, we can do that.
Yes, let's use the raise hand function, please.
Or we can do that. Okay, you all know how to reach me. If you would rather reach me offline, we would be delighted. So I'll move on to the next item, which is the FCC-SCC report, and I'll call on Professor Bullman to give this report.
Thank you, President Gable. So as we've just heard, there's a long list. A lot of things have happened too on the FCC side. We've had, since August only, 8 meetings of the Faculty Consultative Committee, 3 meetings of the Senate Consultative Committee, as well as various other committee meetings. So I just cannot really comment on all of these things. So I will just pick a couple of highlights. As I similarly wrote to system faculty in late August, we have all received a seemingly endless flow of emails from President Gable, Provost Croson, deans, department heads, and administrators. And this has not changed since August. So, and I don't mean that as a complaint. Our work and our private lives have all been so deeply affected by the multiple pandemics that all these messages are actually critical for us to do our work. And when I say us, that really means students, staff, and faculty, all of us. And so a key point of my message today is to assure you that the flow of information has not just been from the administration to the rest of us, as some of you might have expected sometimes. The SEC chair and vice chair have participated regularly in President Gabel's Emergency Management Policy Committee meetings. That started in March in daily meetings, going to twice a week, and then eventually to once a week, and occasionally even actually canceling one of those events more recently, finally, I would say, because the pressure just has become a little bit lower to make new decisions and think about new things on a routine basis. All of these meetings have had inputs from Jill DeBoer, Director of the Health Emergency Response Office, Vice President for Clinical Affairs, Medical School Dean Jacob Tolar, Provost Croson, Vice President Research Chris Kramer, the chancellors of Crookston, Duluth, Morris, Rochester campuses, and yes, also the SEC chair and vice chair. So we were there. Governance input had also been listened to at the Provost's Fall 2020 Scenario Advisory Team. That was then expanded to the spring, the Academic and Student Affairs Work Group relating to COVID-19, the Academic Research Planning Work Group, and the Finance and Operations Planning Work Group. One activity actually that many of you will be particularly knowledgeable about through our Senate meetings are the numerous meetings that were held to address the university's response to the new Title IX mandated federal regulations on sexual harassment and misconduct that were required implementation by August 14th. So this included meetings with governance committees, including students, civil service, P&A, and faculty representation. As you probably know, the thus developed policies were approved by the Board of Regents, but after some regents questioned the size of the hearing panels, the Senate Consultative Committee sent a letter to the regents emphasizing the preference of students, civil service, P&A, and faculty for panels of 5. We have not heard on that topic again since then. I'm also happy to report that in the meantime, the Senate staff and the Office of Equity and Diversity have worked together to formulate the rules for the nominations of the selection committee for panelists and the nominations of panelists. So you should have seen the calls for the panelist nominations. The student, civil service, P&A, and faculty consultative committees are helping with the nomination of the selection committees. Now, I will skip the topic of the Campus Safety Committee because that we will be talking about shortly. As senators will recall, there was an extensive consultation around the spring break 2021. The president just mentioned that. And so I'm not going to really go into any detail with that. I just really want to highlight 2 things. Most of our peers will have no spring break. We do have one, and that's because we listened to the students foremost. And the second thing I want to highlight is the fact that our spring break here on the Twin Cities campus will coincide with the school break of the Minneapolis and St. Paul schools. From day one, President Gabel immediately understood that that would give a break to some of our faculty and students who are parents. And so I would like to thank once more President Gabel for that. Now, these are all great things. So I also want to mention 2 things that, at least in the past, were not that great, but I think we've actually made improvements on. One thing is in regard to the Senate consultative meetings. It's my personal experience that in the past, we did not use the Senate consultative meetings as efficiently as possible. While input from students, civil service, and P&A employees was considered, the agenda for the SEC meetings was largely set by the FCC chair and vice chair. The interaction between the students, civil service, P&A, and faculty consultative committees could have been more productive. And so we realized this summer that we could do better. And we have taken steps to improve that. So starting this academic year, the chair and vice chair of the Student Consultative Committee, the Civil Service Consultative Committee, the P&A Consultative Committee, and the Faculty Consultative Committee are all meeting 3 weeks ahead of every SEC meeting to discuss together what is in everybody's mind and determine together important agenda items for the upcoming SEC meetings. I believe that I speak on behalf of all the chairs and vice chairs of these 4 consultative committees when I say that we have all been incredibly satisfied by this new approach. Another part of our Senate workings that we have changed recently pertains to the meeting minutes. Writing the minutes for Senate committee meetings is a laborious process. So in a regular year, when committees meet less often, the delay until the minutes are available had a little bit less of an impact. But with this year, with these lots of special meetings, the frequent meetings, there has been an increasing pressure on our Senate staff to provide the minutes timely. So we have met with Courtney, the director of the Senate office, and she has modified with her staff the procedures to prepare those meetings. So I think you're going to start seeing these minutes coming out more quickly. So I do want to thank Vicky and her team really for that special effort that they have made in this area. This ends my report. Back to you, President Gabel.
Thank you, Professor Buhlman. Okay, item 9 is a proposal to amend the University Senate rules to add additional ex officio representation to the Student Academic Integrity Committee. I'll ask if there's any questions or if there's any discussion for this item.
We have a question from Scott Petty.
Yes, Scott.
Hi, Scott Petty, graduate student senator from CFANS. I just have a question of curiosity. So pretty much at the start of every committee charter in the Senate bylaws, there will be a comment about ex officio members as approved by the Senate. I mean, I don't know if you're necessarily the best authority to ask on this. I guess I was just, is this formally the way in which that Senate approved process for all ex officio positions work, and that it lives and is housed within the rules? Because the governing documents of the Senate are obviously quite massive. I mean, they're hundreds of pages long. I just wanted to confirm that, like, in that part in the bylaws of every committee where it says that ex officio members can be named by the approval of the University Senate, or whichever Senate the committee is formally reporting to. I just was, out of curiosity, this is the process, that it all lives in the rules, if that's a somewhat coherent question.
I think I'm tracking.
I'm really just asking someone to like talk through that, like, this is how all of that happens across all of the committees, and then presumably it lives in the rules of the Senate that the committee is reporting to. It's kind of catching you unfairly, but I was thinking Etty might be here to answer my question.
I think the short answer is yes. I'm looking at Article 2, Section 1. While people who know more than me are scurrying. So Scott, with your indulgence, can I take the next question?
Sure.
Okay.
We have another question from Penny Edgell.
Hi, Penny.
Hi, CLA faculty senator, thanks. So quick question is, I just want a little bit of background and whether or not, what is the difference, or what is the rationale for asking for an ex officio member versus simply calling in folks from CEI or from the central technology folks to answer questions as on a consulting basis? So why making this, why is there a proposal to change the committee structure versus simply calling in a wide range of people who might consult on various kinds of issues as they arise that involve either technology or some of the other changes noted in the proposal.
Okay, for this, I would call on either the chairs, Eddie DeVoe or Professor Ken Leopold, if they're available.
I'm available. I can try to answer the question. I think that technology has become such an so integrally entwined with pedagogy and assessment that issues related to technology and academic integrity come up so often that it just makes sense to have someone there all the time rather than trying to schedule, to the next meeting and the next meeting and the next meeting.
Thank you. That answers the question.
Okay, thank you, Penny. And Scott, ex officio, here's my understanding. So ex officio members are identified in the rules. So the Senate identifies the member by amending the rules. And so we follow the University Senate Rules, Article 2, Section 1 in order to do that. Does that get to your question? Scott, if you replied, you're muted. Okay, we'll come back to this. Chris, are there any additional questions?
I don't see any additional hands raised at this time.
Okay, let me give Scott one more second before I call for the vote. Okay, I'm going to call for the vote. This vote is for all members of the University Senate. A majority of members present and voting is needed to approve. Host, if you could post the poll.
We'll give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 155 ayes, 10 nays, and 13 abstentions, the motion prevails.
Thank you. All right, item 10 is a second vote on a proposal to amend the University Senate bylaws to create a campus safety committee. I'm going to call on Professor Bullman to present this item.
So on June 29th, the University Senate voted on a proposed amendment to its bylaws to create a new Senate Committee on Campus Safety. The proposed amendment passed with a very narrow majority, but the vote did not meet the threshold required by the University Senate Constitution for a bylaw change to pass in a single Senate meeting. Therefore, the University Senate Constitution requires that a second vote be taken today. Today, a simple majority of votes from eligible voting members of the Senate will adopt the bylaw change. Before I comment on anything else, let me thank the student authors of the proposed bylaw amendment who submitted it on behalf of the Council of Graduate Students, COGS, and the Professional Student Government, PSG. I and the Senate Consultative Committee appreciate the creativity and the energy that the authors have put into this proposal. Last night, in her email to all senators, Senator Allard emphasized that the students deserve the credit for this proposal. I want to fully support that statement. The SEC is supportive of a role of governance on campus safety, but it does not want to claim credit. So thank you, Senator Allard and your group. What we are doing today is giving senators a second opportunity to discuss the proposed amendment as it stands. Per Senate rules, the proposal cannot be amended. At the end of the discussion, we will vote. It goes without saying that whatever the outcome is, I and the Senate Consultative Committee are fully supportive of whatever the Senate vote decides. So what happened in the first Senate meeting on this topic? The discussion showed much appreciation for the concerns raised by the authors of the proposed bylaw amendment. The Senate showed a willingness and a desire for change. However, senators commented on the absence of a widespread consultation and raised concerns about the substance of the proposal. Several ideas on how to improve the proposal were suggested, and several senators offered their help. What happened since June? In July, the SEC reached out to the authors of the proposed amendment, suggesting a Zoom meeting. In that meeting, SEC Chair Ned Patterson, University Senate Vice Chair Carol Chomsky, and myself discussed next steps with the authors of the proposed amendment. It was suggested that the authors of the amendment work with other government entities and stakeholders to develop a revised version of the proposal, taking into account suggestions and concerns voiced by the senators at the June 29th meeting. As Senator Allard mentioned in her email from last night, the authors were encouraged to withdraw the amendment until after such a consultation has been completed. The appointment of Dr. Alexander, which President Gabel mentioned too in her report to the Senate, that appointment to conduct an external review of the UMPD was noted, and it was suggested that his recommendations about oversight of the UMPD be taken into account in shaping a Senate Committee on Public Safety. Since that Zoom meeting in August, SEC leadership reached out several times to the authors of the amendment, but has not received any direct reply. The SEC respects that. I do want to emphasize that the authors have the right not to withdraw their proposal and let the Senate decide today with their vote. That is the process that we have in this body. What the SEC wanted to avoid, though, is a negative vote on this proposed amendment with no alternative in sight. I think that would be really devastating for many of us. To that end, if the proposed bylaw amendment is not accepted today, the SEC has committed to set up a task force with a charge to further develop the proposal for a new safety committee or a similar governance structure within this academic year. We hope that students, staff, and faculty will contribute to reaching the goal we all share, creating a strong and effective governance role in addressing campus public safety concerns. So in conclusion, today's vote is not a referendum on the value of a Senate Safety Committee. A no vote is only a temporary postponement of the idea until we are able to make a well-considered decision about the appropriate forum for a committee. The SEC commits to considering the issue after Dr. Alexander's report is available and after appropriate consultation across all governance groups and stakeholders has happened. Therefore, the SEC urges senators to vote no to the proposed bylaw amendment. The Senate Consultative Committee discussed this recommendation and approved it by electronic ballot with 12 yes votes, 0 no votes, and 1 abstention. That concludes my introduction of the topic. Back to you, President Gabel.
Thank you, Professor Bowman. Okay, I would open the floor for questions and discussion. Are there questions, Chris?
I saw one hand raised and then it just went away. Oh, there we go. Ellen Messer-Davidow.
Ellen?
Yes, I want to state my position on the matter. I think that the formation of a committee at this point is premature. I think we need to wait and see what the consultants, the professional consultants report advises. It might advise an even stronger committee or advisory body or working group than the one in the current proposal. I'm saying this, and I want you to understand where I'm coming from. I'm deeply concerned about safety issues at the university. 3 of my 4 courses this year focus on racism and classism. I have a book coming out in spring on landmark law cases concerning racism. So I am a strong supporter of a welcoming and safe environment, but I don't think we should act precipitously. We need to see what the report is. And I think we also need data on different types of crimes and bad behavior on campus before we start crafting a committee or advisory body. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next in the queue, I have William Jones.
Hi, William.
Excuse me, I asked to be recognized to respond to questions at the beginning of the meeting.
Thank you, Scott. That was, as far as I heard, not a question. So we'll move on to William Jones.
Thank you. I wasn't on the Senate in the when this came up the first time, and so I have a few questions related to the concerns that are referred to in the FCC statement. Just if you could provide some information on what the concerns about the proposal were, and then I'm confused about what types of issues might be raised in the report that would not be addressed by a committee. I don't understand. So if you could explain more thoroughly what types of ways in which this current proposal would constrain a response to the report rather than that would prevent, that would limit the response to the report rather than the need to actually wait and form the committee. It seems like we might want to have the committee in operation before in order to receive the report. So I'm just looking for some clarification on that.
I'll direct that one to you, Phil, and then we'll go from there to see if that resolves the question.
Absolutely, yes, and I'm happy to comment on that. I think the multiple comments that were made in the June Senate meeting, on one hand, kind of addressed the nature of this committee. Should these primarily be a sounding board? Should be a review board? Should it be an advisory board? Some additional clarity in the charge of and in the definition of this committee was really was kind of asked for by senators in their comment. There was also the question how this committee relates to existing committees. There is a police oversight committee that actually has not met very frequently. So what will be the relationship to that? And I will say personally, I do very much expect that the report from Dr. Alexander will address that issue as well. There was also the question is to what extent should there be deliberately or not some interaction with law enforcement? Should there be input on that committee? There was the concern from senators that this is a question that should be thought about before we create this committee. There was also a concern that the members of the committee were not really representative of the whole university, and I will say in particular that the civil service and P&A consultative committees had senators from that group expressed concerns that they were not represented well enough. And then there were also questions about ex officio members, which is probably also the reason why Scott Petty asked the question previously about ex officio members on committees. And I think that for the time being, but I'd be happy to hear from other members of the Senate, their opinion about these issues that I just briefly alluded to. Back to you, President Gabel.
Okay. William, did that address your question?
Well, the one question just about what types of things might be raised in Dr. Alexander's report that would need to be accounted for in the formation of the committee.
If I may, I'll just take a little indulgence and express my understanding of that since I'm the one who engaged him. So to some degree, we don't know what we don't know, which is why I share the opinion that this is premature, that this is not a no, but a let's wait and see, that there may be membership, procedures, timing, points of engagement that having the benefit of his subject matter expertise would inform, and that we have no risk in waiting for that insight. The worst thing that happens is that we take this up as is with the full information that we already have underway available to us in a fully consulted process where everyone who wanted to participate had the opportunity to do so.
Thank you.
Sure. Let me take the next question.
Next in the queue, I have Missy Juliet.
Hi, Missy.
Hi, President Gable. Thank you very much. I am the Civil Service Chair-elect. And one of the things that I noticed with the proposal is that while this is supposed to be for both students and staff, as Phil mentioned, the makeup of the committee, this also leaves out a really big group of our staff of labor represented people who would not get to have a voice in campus safety. And that would be the reason that I would also not support this as it stands right now.
Scott, would you like to reply to that?
Yes. One of the issues of having this presented by someone who is advocating for its defeat, who did not invite us to any of the meetings at which it was discussed, is that there seems to be a profound misunderstanding of what the proposal is. As it stands right now, the Senate Committee on Finance and Planning, on which I serve, is the advisory and consulting unit of the Senate that covers campus safety. So right now, issues of campus safety are coming to the Senate advisory and consultative process of the committee structure through finance and planning. This arrangement is suboptimal. The only thing that this current proposal does is it essentially takes this element of the portfolio of the Finance and Planning Committee and assigns it to a new dedicated Senate committee. If there is some desire to have a genuine oversight board of UMPD, and that is a recommendation of Dr. Alexander, doing this does not in any way impede doing that later. All that this proposal does is take an advisory role that currently belongs to Finance and Planning, where that advisory role is not, in my opinion, as a member of Finance and Planning, is not being performed as well as it can be, and removes that advisory role into a new dedicated committee that individual members of the university can apply to be a member of based on explicitly on their interest in this topic. As for the lack of representation of union bargaining units are excluded from the Senate, and they are excluded from Finance and Planning right now. They are already excluded from this set of conversations. This proposal does not actively exclude them. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. So if I may, simply because this refers to committee structures, I think it's probably more appropriate that Phil chime in response to that.
I think Scott's answer kind of illustrates this. There's just simply still things that need to be thought about. I mean, the topic of campus safety definitely also affects EAD, social concerns, disabilities issues, and others. And so I think that's exactly where the SEC felt that more consultation and more thorough thinking should be done. Just because we're such a safety committee would be kind of taking one task that is currently the task of finance, really, or of the finance committee, that really does not mean that automatically therefore means there are no concerns.
Okay, thank you. Can we go to the next question?
The next person in the queue is Matea Allert.
Matea?
Hi. Yeah, so I am one of the authors of this proposal, and I just wanted to clarify some things. So Phil had said that, we want to postpone this because we're waiting on a report from Dr. Alexander. And I've spent, over 4 hours talking to Dr. Alexander, and I talked to him on the phone this morning, and he is not planning on bringing up anything in relation to this. So I'm confused on why we're waiting to get a report from Dr. Alexander when this stuff will not be included in his report. And I just wanted to comment on that. Thank you.
I'll reply to that. So Mattia, I'm not sure, I wasn't party to your conversation. There's without question an expectation of recommendations from Dr. Alexander about governance structures. He's not familiar with our specific committees. We wouldn't expect him to be, but the notion of how the university can, as a community committed to shared governance, share in discussions of questions of safety and oversight and selection of leaders of the campus community who have that as part or all of their responsibilities, without question, part of what we expect his report to include. And if it didn't, we would go back to him and expect him to edit accordingly.
The next person in the queue that I have is Terry Wallace.
Hi, Terry.
Hi, President Gable. I've got some concerns on this committee, mostly because of the makeup, that there's so many students, and it's an equal amount students and faculty staff, or faculty civil service P&A. But that puts the power in the hands of the students. We're here a lot longer, and I feel we have to be looking at it in the long-term effect, not just the crisis that's happening right now that we're dealing with. My previous job, I worked with PD, St. Paul PD, and we would have to bring them in for shootings, gang violence, various things. One of the things I know you keep hearing from different student groups is disarm the police, do this to, kind of stripping them of their power. And I think we need, those of us who are going to be here, and I want to feel safe on campus, because right now it's so empty. It's hard to feel safe when I'm trying to go in to do something because there's nobody there. But I think we have to look at this as the long-term effect and not just relating to what's happening right now. I want to feel safe. I don't want to disarm the police or anything, because if something happens, what? Excuse me, I have to go back to the office and get my gun, that kind of stuff, that's not possible. I want to be able to feel safe and that they are doing their job the way they should. And I feel it needs a fair and even numbers of an even representation of civil service, P&A also. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for the background noise, everybody. Next question.
Next on the list, I have Carol Chomsky.
Carol?
Thank you. So I agree with Scott that it would be a really good thing to take this issue of public safety and create a separate committee, because finance and planning does so much else. And we need a committee that focuses on this concern. But for me, the question is, how do we do that, and how do we do it effectively? And that involves, in my mind, understanding what public safety encompasses on campus, what parts of the university decision-making relate to public safety, which administrators are involved, which parts of the university are engaged with this, and to understand that, and also understand the concerns of those on campus about public safety. And that piece of it will come out of, in large part, I think, or in part, Dr. Alexander's report. I think that we need more understanding of how to create an effective committee that has the right charge, that specifies what to look at, that specifies which ex officio members should be there so that there's a robust conversation, that sets up lines of communication, and that determines the appropriate composition of the committee. How many students from which part? Is it a system-wide? Is it not system-wide? How many staff members? How many faculty members? And that's why typically to create a committee like this, in the past, we've had a task force set up to look at those questions, to consult with all those groups and figure out what makes sense as a proposal and then bring it to the Senate. And that's why I agree that it is premature. It's not just waiting for Dr. Alexander, it's waiting for the consultation so that we have the information we need to make an effective committee that can start its work effectively immediately.
Thank you, Carol. Next question.
Next, I have Ryan Mactimus.
Hi, Ryan.
Hi, Ryan Mactimus, he, him, his, graduate student senator of 3 terms for the College of Education and Human Development and former vice chair for Student Senate. I am also an individual who has served 2 terms, or is actively serving the second of 2 terms on the University Senate Disabilities Issues Committee and a number of other assignments and service-related work throughout the campus. I would preface my comment by pointing out that I do have privilege. I am a Caucasian, cisgendered, white male. I'm also a person with disability. I have low vision. And the truth is that what has been pointed out in terms of the committee from all my service work is historically very similar to how the Disabilities Issues Committee was first formed. Initially, there was no Disabilities Issues Committee. Initially, the concerns of students or university members with disabilities was taken up through equity, access, and diversity. But the secondary committee of disabilities issues split off from EAD in order to give dedicated time and space to the critical issue of disability identity on campus, which in literally all of the conversations that I've ever had with various actors on diversity on campus, if I'm not in the room to discuss disability, it doesn't get discussed. I also think that that is similar to what may be happening with finance and planning and security issues on campus. I think it's reasonable to split and form a separate committee from finance and planning, given the current dynamics. And yes, a lot of them are student-led. But that does not actually mean that student advocacy on this issue is inappropriate. Rather, it is very inappropriate. We mentioned that students do not have power. It is a historical stance of the university that students are given a great deal of power. And frankly, if we want to get down to nuts and bolts, without students, you don't have a university. So I would advocate for this committee. I think it's very similar in nature and scope, and I think it's critical now that it be established. And I think that the involvement of multiple student perspectives is critical, because no 1 or 2 students can possibly know all of the factors facing the concerns of all the students on campus. I can't possibly know what it feels like to walk on campus as a woman. I can't possibly know what it is to walk on campus around police as a person of color. I do know that half of police on citizen homicide is—
Your 3 minutes are over.
Oh, sorry. I yield back.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Next question, please.
The next person in the queue is Aman Qureshi.
Please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for setting up this meeting. I just wanted to take a couple minutes to comment on some things that weren't mentioned about this proposal for our newer senators who maybe weren't a part of the summer discussion. So just to preface, the Professional Student Government and COGS created a task force in response to George Floyd, one of the subgroups which specifically was designed to address policing issues on campus. In the summer, there were lots of proposals that were being brought up, there was no centralized location to bring them forward. And this campus safety committee, a committee that mandates a university response, seemed like a good way to kind of create one centralized location where people could bring not just other proposals, but it could just be a permanent body so that we didn't have to go through all this red tape to just get in touch with the UMPD or, you know, the other multitude of issues that we ran into. And this task force itself was made up of many professional students, many graduate students. We consulted with students from different campuses, as well as community leaders on, you know, not just this specific committee, but other proposals that we brought up in our task force. So this is, I just want to like recenter or comment on like how important it is to keep in mind that this was task force created. We didn't, the authors of this proposal did not just pull this out of thin air. It came after months of consultation and review from students' times in the summer after George Floyd. And I think that that's important history to keep in mind, because as of now, really it's now November and we really haven't seen that much change. So while I understand the need of like forming a task force to then talk about, you know, more issues about the composition and just
30
keep that
seconds.
conversation going, that's just, in my opinion, kind of another way to delay something that needs to have critical action taken. And so I would advocate for this proposal just to create a centralized space. And, you know, I think that the nitty gritty, frankly, of how many students are on it versus how many staff members are on it, that can continue to be an ongoing conversation, but it's important to pass this now so something can get done. Thank you.
Thank you, Aman. Next in the queue.
Next, I have Ben Munson.
Hi, Ben.
Hi, everyone. As someone who has chaired 2 Senate committees over his 21 years here at the university and has brought motions that have successfully passed the Senate now twice, I'm a bit confused about why this is being treated, why the letter of the proposal is being treated as how it would have to be implemented if it were passed, which is to say the Senate Disabilities Issues Committee passed a resolution in April of 2019. And that was immediately, so that was positively received by President Gabel, by Provost Croson, but it will be implemented through a task force. And so this is partly, my question is partly sort of a provocation. Like frankly, I am so strongly in support of this notion, very much for the reasons that the person who shared just prior to me said, that I'm likely to vote for it because my understanding of the university and the governance structure that we're all in right now is that this is going to then be subject to a task force. This is going to be subject to an implementation procedure that is going to sort of like, I'm of course can't remember all of my rules about US politics, but like when there's reconciliation after both houses of Congress pass a bill. So I'd like to say that's kind of a question to the room. Are we really signing on to exactly the letter of the proposal, or are we signing on to this philosophically, providing support for this at a philosophical level, knowing that its implementation is going to be subject to the kinds of administrative changes that happen to all of the things that come to the floor of the Senate, whether they're from disabilities issues or EAD or any of the other committees. The last thing I'd like to say is I really just would like to emphasize how honored I am by the students who have made themselves vulnerable by being here and presenting this. And I'd like to remind everyone that, an overwhelmingly white faculty and staff really aren't the right people to be talking exclusively about the safety of being around police. I mean, as a queer man, I don't feel safe with the police. And I'm sure there are lots of people of color, lots of BIPOC people who feel exactly the same way. So equating police presence with safety is just a fallacy that we should end now. Ceding the floor and muting my video. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ben. And I join you in our appreciation for our students and would ask for Carol Chomsky to reply to the procedural perspective that Ben raised.
Yes, thank you. Because this is, my understanding would be, because this is a creation of a committee, this is not a resolution. it would create the committee. It is not subject to further, if it's passed today, it would not be a task force. It would not be subject to further work in that sense. It simply would be a committee that was created, and then any changes would have to go through a similar Senate process.
Thanks, Carol. That helps a lot.
Okay. Chris, who's next in the queue?
Next, I have Sarah Lam.
Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah Lamb, a UMM faculty senator. My understanding is that the SCC opposes this proposal in part so that Dr. Alexander's report can be considered. And one thing that concerns me is it sounds like we're waiting for something that doesn't have a definite timeline. A question I have is whether there's a group who's working with Dr. Alexander and who will be considering and taking action, what actions to take based on his report. What is the makeup of that group and how are those members selected? Is that a representative group? Secondly, speaking at least in regards to the Morris campus, sadly, the faculty and staff body does not reflect the diversity that exists among the student body. We do not all experience safety issues and policing in the same way. And because of that, I would strongly support a committee with very heavy student representation. Following from that, a question to the authors of the proposal. Are there mechanisms included in the proposal to ensure that BIPOC voices are represented on the committee? Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'll reply on the work that Dr. Alexander is doing since that's being directed by the president's office. So there's no committee per se. He was engaged by the office of the president, but in the meetings that he is scheduling, he's talked to over 200 people. I don't have data on the composition of who he's spoken with, but we've been very conscientious about casting the net very wide, both in terms of faculty, staff, students, community partners, and in terms of representative voices for him to hear from and speak with. We could be more specific when he's done and report back on who he has spoken to, not by name, but by who they are and who they represented in the variety of ways in which we might mean that. The other part of your question, it's not really for me to answer. Do you know who specifically you would expect to hear from on that? I can direct it.
It's a question to the authors of the proposal about kind of if there are mechanisms to ensure racially diverse representation on that committee.
Then we'll defer
I'm
Scott
happy to
over
take the
Matea.
question. I'm happy to take the question. Okay, so the way that I can only speak to how students are placed on committees. I've served on the student committee on committee. I presume that the Senate committee on committee works similarly. When applicants fill out an application to serve on a committee, they're asked 3 questions, and it's upon those 3 questions that their placement is decided. Number 1, why do you wish to serve on this committee? So what is your motivation for joining the committee? The second question is, what viewpoints do you bring to what viewpoints would you bring to the committee's work? And I mean, I'm not going to get the language exactly right, but it's clearly a statement about the diversity of viewpoints you would bring. The third question is about your schedule. Now, I'm fairly certain that it would violate the non-discrimination statement of the university if it were to be like, we will have a reserved seat for someone of this blank. However, I mean, of the 3 questions, one of them is basically, are you too overburdened with work to actually participate in the committee? So it's really decisions being made on 2 questions. Number 1, what's your motivation? Why do you want to be a part of this conversation? And the second question is basically, what viewpoint will you bring to these conversations as an individual if you are brought on? And speaking as someone who has gone through these applications, that's basically the analysis that's going on in response to that question. I hope that answers your concern.
Thank you. Am I allowed to make a quick follow-up comment?
Of course.
I would just say that consulting different members of the university community during the consultation process is different from having a committee charged with thinking about how to implement the recommendations. And I would just follow from Dr. Jones's comment that it seems like it would be a good idea to have a representative committee in place to work on the implementation piece after the report comes out.
May I follow up?
I think that the question was for me, Scott. Okay. Dr. Alexander's recommendations are likely to exceed beyond governance. Obviously, we have him here for a much broader set of questions, and we didn't set those kinds of parameters. And there is an expectation that there would be very broad consultation around anything that would require implementation. So I think that answers Sarah's question. Sarah, is that what you were getting at?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's go on to the next question.
Next in the queue, I have Janet Fitzackerley.
Hi, Janet.
Hi. Back in the spring, when this proposal first came forward, concerns were raised by both members of the Morris and Duluth campuses about the language in the proposal that sometimes refers to the university system, sometimes it refers to a campus, presumably the Twin Cities campus. I would ask both the SEC chair and the authors of the bill, since the spring, what consultation has occurred with the coordinate campuses, and how do you envision that consultation going forward?
Scott or Matea?
Well, so the way the language of the current statement was arrived at, the last and basically final draft, Matea and I and a few other students sat down with Bree, with President Gable's staff to go through kind of essentially the semantics and structure of the statement, or the structure of the proposal. And that's basically how we arrived at the final version of the language, independent of the structure. The proposal was passed at a previous meeting. And it can't be revised while it's on the floor. I mean, it's essentially been on the floor since June. So there has not been consultation with the Morris and Duluth campus specifically about making revisions to the current language in the proposal, as the language is on the floor right now. And it has been on the floor basically since June.
May I also add something in real quick?
Sure, Mon. Yes.
So I just echoing what Scott said, but also just reiterating that when we drafted the proposal, we had consulted with other campuses, all campuses, in creating the composition and the language. Now, it was more professional and graduate student centered because it was a professional and graduate student task force. But we did take a lot of care to make sure that all the campuses were represented in the actual initial drafting.
Thank you. I think I'm going to call on Phil Bowman here, because the question of consultation, I think, is something that he should address as well.
Sure, yeah. I think that several of the comments that have just been made kind of illustrates actually that level of consultation. First of all, I do want to remind everybody what I mentioned in the leading remarks in the beginning. The SCC really wanted to further consult and talk with the students who wrote this. And so we were waiting for in September and October to hear back from the students, and reached out multiple times to them. What does consultation really mean? Yeah, you sit together, you think about what arguments are being made by all the sides, and usually consultation also involves that once that has happened, writers of a proposal go back, they do some revision, and they come back and they show you what has happened. I think that is this misunderstanding that we have here. Just going to the different campuses, for example, is a good thing. I applaud that, but only going to the students of the other campuses, that is not broad consultation. Also, I do recall that leading up to the first presentation in the Senate, it is definitely true that the students did talk to a number of groups, but they went back to their first proposal. They made some very minor changes, and they did not actually show that back to the committees and to the communities that actually made comments. So I think there just simply needs to be a deeper level of consultation where people actually really sit together and try to make this a stronger proposal. If we were in in-person meetings, everybody would know or could know how people have voted in the past. And I have said that in other places before, and I'll say it here again. I personally voted in support of this proposal in June. What I have seen in the meantime is that there has been really no further consultation. There's a lot of people who have concerns about it, who think we could do better, we must do better than what this proposal is. And so I think that is why my attitude now is if we can't really improve on this after all the good feedback that we've gotten, then I can personally not vote with a yes to this proposal. Thank you.
Next question.
Next person in the queue is Scott Petty.
Hi, Scott.
Just to reiterate my frustration with the structure of these proceedings. So I am now sitting here as the author, not being allowed to present, and therefore having to keep notes on what things people say so that when I make it through the queue, I can address them. Number one, no Senate committee has the power to disarm the police. That will never be a power of any Senate committee. This is a red herring. Number two, Carol Chomsky brought up ex officio members. As we literally just saw on the agenda of this meeting, the appointment of ex officio members is owned by the University Senate. It happens by the University Senate making changes to the University Senate's rules as a separate matter from this bylaws amendment. The text of the bylaws amendment has the standard language of every Senate committee that ex officio members are appointed by the University Senate. Next point, Phil talks about consultation. We asked to have a meeting with Phil twice during the period when this proposal was being drafted. He declined to meet with us both times. The Senate Consultative Committee has met and discussed our proposal multiple times without inviting us. This proposal was presented in June and it was passed. It is guaranteed a second in the form that it was passed, in the exact form that it was passed. It is built into the rules of the Senate that there is then a mandatory second vote at the next regularly scheduled meeting of the University Senate, which is this meeting. This bylaws amendment has been on the floor of the University Senate since June. We did not have the power to revise it without withdrawing the proposal, which we were not willing to do, given that we have already crossed the first hurdle. As for the representation of students, this has been a problem. This has been an issue which has existed for many, many years. The Faculty Senate has had 100 years to create such a committee. This proposal comes from a group of students. We have crafted a proposal as students. We are obviously concerned about student representation and making sure that there is as wide of a student perspective reflected in this committee as possible. Thus, we have created the student representation that we have. It has been criticized for having too much faculty representation, and it has simultaneously been criticized for having too little faculty representation. We have made sure that we have tried as best we could to include as diverse a set of student voices as we could. We are student senators bringing a student proposal to the University Senate. I don't think that the student representation is something that we should be asked to apologize for. I will yield the floor.
Thank you, Scott.
May I also chime in real quick?
Very briefly, Aman, we let that go far beyond the 2 minutes.
Okay. I just did want to reiterate, I mean, a lot of what Scott was saying with the fact that we are students, and one of the biggest things on the research that we did on our task force was that the university, for whatever reason, this bureaucracy, this red tape, it has gotten in the way of a lot of student wants and desires, and a lot of things that students need to feel safe on campus are now being made very difficult because of these nitty-gritty questions of like, okay, and hurdles. And it's just very frustrating to me as a student to hear that there are people in this university who would want to subdue student representation in favor of faculty representation or P&A representation when it is students that are primarily affected by campus safety issues. And when we have more people of color in the student area than we do in the faculty and staff area. Thank you.
Thank you, Aman. Let's take the next question.
The next person in the queue is Jack Flom.
Hi, I'm Jack Flom. I'm the MSA representative to the SSCC, and my pronouns are they, them. I'd like to first say that the name of the organization that we are part of is the University Senate, not the Faculty Senate, and the organization also represents the University of Minnesota, not the Faculty Association of Minnesota. So I'd just like to say that it's not all about faculty. So where do students primarily live? They live on campus or near campus within the jurisdiction of UMPD. And I don't think it's right that faculty and staff who, I assume with basic logic, mostly do not live on near campus and have more of a say. They want them to have more of a say than the student population. And I'd also like to note that an overwhelmingly white faction of faculty and staff are speaking out against this committee. And it's really just a committee. It's not like we're passing something that's we're not banning guns on the police. We're not doing that. It's just a committee. And for current events, I like to reflect on what happened last night in I-94, and because it's a wrong and immoral what happened to many of these students that were at the protest. They were arrested for exercising their First Amendment rights, and not having a campus safety committee to have oversight over these important issues like that is wrong. And it's wrong to say that we should just wait, because that's what we did after Philando Castile and Jamar Clark. The University of Minnesota Twin Cities is largely located within Minneapolis, and that's also where George Floyd was murdered. The only thing students have seen is words and promises from the administration, and we need to create this committee instead of delay it for no reason. Administrators in this meeting right now are literally repeating history by delaying this for no reason. We don't need to speak to every single faculty or staff member in the entire world to make this happen. I yield my time.
Thank you, Jack. Next point, next person in the queue.
Next, I have Briggs Tobel.
Hi, Briggs.
Hi, President Gable. Briggs Tobel, pronouns he, him, his, and I'm the chair of the Student Senate Constitution Committee. I just want to say I'm flabbergasted. I'm using that word today to describe some of the my reaction to some of the comments I'm hearing from my colleagues in the University Senate. I also want to echo the sentiments from MSA Rep, the SSCC, Jack Flom. This is a system-wide body, not a Twin Cities body. And so we should not be beholden to occurrences that are happening on one campus specifically. I want to make that very clear, because I feel as though there are multiple individuals within this own body that does not understand that. And I don't see how we should be beholden by something that's happening on the Twin Cities campus when this is an issue that affects the entire system. So I want to make that clear. In addition, there's a comment that was made about how we should not be removing guns, even though this committee has nothing to do with removing guns. I just want to make it very clear. Guns does not equal safety. That's not an opinion. That's a fact. Because just as you may feel as though guns protect you further, there are 2 times as many people out there who actually are scared of guns and think it actually poses a threat to them individually. In addition to that, I find it appalling that multiple individuals want to repeal student representation on this committee. Somebody said, we're here for a long time, so we should be having more representation. There's a difference between longevity and proximity to the areas where this occurs. If I were to tell any of you or ask any of you what just occurred on the Twin Cities campus within the past hour, I'm not sure anybody here would be able to tell. However, I'm in the Twin Cities. I'm on the Twin Cities campus. I'm in one of the residence halls. There was a car crash that occurred, and then an individual ran on foot, and multiple cops are here. We're here. We're living the experience. I do have one question for the authors, and this will depend how I vote on this. But what was the consultation with the system campuses on this?
Scott, Matea? Scott or Matteo, would you like to reply to Briggs's question?
I'm not sure if they're having internet problems or not, but can I attempt to answer the question, Briggs?
Yeah, Mon, I just wanted to know what the consultation was with system campuses outside of the Twin Cities.
It was primarily through professional and graduate students who were on other campuses who are a part of our PSG and COGS task force, as well as professional and graduate faculty that were referred to us by those students, particularly within the medical school.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And there could be more, but this is just kind of all I know right now off the top of my head, because Mattia and Scott would have more information.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next in the queue.
Next, I have Karen Sue Taussig.
Karen?
Karen Sue Taussig.
I'm sorry, Karen Sue.
Senator, faculty from CLA. I mostly want to second strongly the points that Ben Munson made, and also the points that Briggs Topol just made. I'm strongly inclined to support this. I am disappointed by the specificity. I do think it would be better if this proposal had been something that could be worked with as a process like the Disability Committee was. But I'm extremely sympathetic to the experiences of students and their frustration with issues of timeliness, issues of red tape and bureaucracy and process. I do think we need to take seriously those concerns around our governance structure. I'm honestly a lot less concerned about, waiting for Alexander than I am for having a timely response to the experiences and concerns of students. Again, I wish that there was less specificity and more sort of process built into developing this committee, but I think it is important. And
30 seconds.
Mostly I was prompted to speak because I was so offended by the idea of, I want to feel safe. I don't want a police officer to have to go back to their office to get their gun. That is just so deeply offensive when so many students feel so unsafe by the fact that there are police guns on campus. And I just think we need to take that very seriously. And that comment was just so upsetting to me. And I just want to put that out there, that given what's happening in our country right now.
Your 2 minutes are exhausted.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen Sue. Next in the queue.
Next is Sarani Ranjarajan.
Sarani?
I'm sorry. So I have a very brief ask and statement to make. Essentially that for this proposal to address safety on each campus. You are now voting to confirm or ratify the creation of this committee. And I'm going to ask that you vote to ratify. And that's for 3 reasons. First, on the concern that a committee with students, undergraduate, graduate, and professional have insufficient competence is concerning in itself. We are not incompetent by reason of our age or inexperience, especially with regard to our lived experience and our fears. And perhaps we can, as a community, begin to see this sort of diversity as a strength instead of a weakness. Second, we have 50,000 vulnerable students in the Twin Cities alone. That's not all the other campuses included. The total faculty and staff across all campuses, according to OIR, is 27,000. Therefore, a statement that says that equal representation for faculty, staff, and students is unreasonable is really not very democratic. Please give us our representation on this critical matter in which we are vulnerable and which we actually feel threatened. Third, a bylaw proposal that has been passed as this was may not be changed while it is still on the floor. To suggest that we should pull back a past proposal to make changes is
30
unreasonable.
seconds.
We are always able to change not only the mandate of the committee, but also the composition. Once we have a report, we can incorporate that through the Senate, but we should not delay this important step. Since we can't change it once it's created, the first important thing is that this committee must exist and stop being a peripheral thing of the financial. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name of the committee that it derives from. We do not have an alternative proposal here. So if you do not confirm this, we are not going to have a campus safety Senate oversight committee. I would rather vote for something rather than nothing. And yes, we should have more consultation, and let's do it once we have the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll remind the voting body that once the committee is formed, to change it would require a bylaw amendment, as Carol described earlier, and that it is possible to create a campus safety committee later through another proposal. If there are concerns about that, I want to be clear that there's certainly nothing coming, at least from the Office of the President or from the administration, indicating otherwise. So we're going to hit the time limit. I want to go ahead and let people know that if they're in the queue for a second time, it is unlikely that we would be able to call on you. If possible, if we could cede to those who have not yet had a chance to speak so that we can call on as many people as possible before we hit the time limit. Next in the queue, please.
Next, I have Jerry Cohen.
Hi, Jerry.
Hello. So, Jerry Cohen, I'm a senator from CFANS, and I am also a member of the Senate Judicial Committee, and of course, a few other things. But first of all, I just want to speak to the fact that I think that we really don't want perfect to be the enemy of the good. The second is this 2020 represents 50 years since I was appointed by Chancellor Hinderaker at the University of California, Riverside, to be on a committee of students advising him on police, campus police, city police, on-campus interactions. And so I can speak with some long-term certainty as to how effective that can be, and it is. And so I would just like to say that there's nothing that we pass here today that can't be modified. We just went through modifying an ad hoc member of a committee. The best thing to do is to have structures in place. If structures are in place, we can move forward. I think the students have done a really good job on this. And as much as FCC would like to use a lot of somewhat specious arguments about interaction to dissuade us from passing this, there is lots of important good that can come from this. And I think modifying the committee once it's formed is actually a lot better because we'll have experience at that time to make legitimate changes in its functioning.
30 seconds.
I don't want to, go against our president because I respect her highly, but I do think that there's a lot of good here that can happen, and it is a statement of our concern. And delaying it doesn't make it better. But I just want to point out that I once had an administrator who told me that that they weren't happy with what I did, and as I told them, there wasn't a darn thing we can do here today that we can't undo tomorrow. So I would encourage passing it and then finding out where we go from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Next comment.
Next, I have Justin Janke.
Justin?
Hi, everybody. I'm a student senator from Carlson School of Business. It's my first time commenting in my first meeting, so I'll try to be brief, but just bear with me. More or less, I would echo what was just said. Sometimes it seems like perfect could be the enemy of good. And I think we all have the same goal, right? Is campus safety. And I hope, and it seems like the real work to be done here is figuring that issue out. And we're spending all this time on simply setting up the committee, which it seems like has been already thought out quite well. And I agree with the gentleman before me that just said, you know, let's get on with the real work. And we can always adjust as we go. That's my 2 cents. I think I would be before the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Next comment, please.
Next, I have Aaron Heath.
Aaron?
Hi, good afternoon. So just a couple things. This morning, PAC actually met with Dr. Alexander. It was the second meeting that we had with him. And so one of the questions which was brought up was, what is the extent to which his work needs to come first before we are able to do some consulting and some collaboration and try to move things forward? And the guidance that he provided us was that we should not necessarily wait for his report from his point of view, realizing that what he is covering is primarily, but not entirely, Twin Cities focused. And in addition, he said if it's kind of working in tandem, perhaps we're able to do some coordination together. So there is that piece. But the second piece that I also want to emphasize is that we are supportive of the student representation, which is on the committee. We are not seeking to reduce that number. What we are seeking, and I know this seems like counting, like splitting hairs, we are seeking proportionate representation of faculty and staff, including bargaining unit. Realizing that we are the university senate, and in that indicates that we need to come forward in partnership together in order to do something that is reflective of all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Next in the queue,
Next, we have Jeremy Jenkins.
Jeremy.
Thank you, Madam President. Somewhat dovetailing with what Aaron said slightly, I think that sufficient representation for staff on this committee is important. And I no way mean to dilute the student vote there. But what I would say is I think the disproportionate representation is a problem that exists across the Senate committee structure, including, for example, EAD, where I've served, I'm now in my 6th year of serving. The staff are somewhat systematically underrepresented on these committees, and I hope it's something that this body will take up more broadly in the not too distant future. With that in mind, what I would say is that I would be inclined to move ahead with the proposal on the floor here as it is, with the understanding that it can be revised and with the hope that representation on a number of committees will be revised and revisited in short order, and because I think that needs to be done. And if that involves an additional bylaw change, well, then so be it, and we'll take care of it. There's no need to get this committee perfect
30 seconds
and think that everything else is ready. I mean, let's go ahead and move with this and then make additional changes along the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. There are 7 people in the queue. I'm going to cut it off after those 7 in the interest of respecting the time limits. There are only 6 in that 7 who haven't spoken. The person in the queue who has spoken before, I don't know who you are, but if you wouldn't mind seating, and we'll come back to you at the end if there is time remaining, if you would be willing. So next in the queue, please.
Next is Pablo Meraz.
Hi, I'm a senator from the medical school. First of all, I would like to congratulate the students for making the effort to put this committee together. It takes courage, it takes time, it takes effort. I think you've been doing a fantastic job. I've been listening to the conversation here, and I'm actually quite shocked by the level of patronizing and condescending that's been coming towards the resident, particularly from the members of FCC. Students are the soul of the university. If there's no students, we can all pack it and go home because there's no reason for us to be here. We are here for the students. So I want to underline that the fact that the students are making an effort to work on safety, whether it's a committee or something else, it doesn't matter how you call it. It doesn't matter, what are the procedures. The matter is that we're going to start working on it. I was just checking my messages. Since August, I got 17 safety alerts on my phone regarding the campus. This is not clearly the level that we all want to see. So the fact that the students are doing something about it is absolutely commendable, and I will be voting for that proposal. I also want to comment on something that I found absolutely appalling. The statement by Terry Wallace saying that we are here longer. What does it mean? You're a senator to the university. This is absolutely disgraceful. To say that you have to go to your office to get the gun to feel
30
safe
seconds.
at the campus university in the United States is disgraceful. In fact, I think you should resign to be a senator because you're not fulfilling the philosophy of that position. Thank you very much.
Next comment, please.
Next, I have Emily McGuire.
Hi, Emily McGuire, student senator from the School of Public Health, she, hers. I agree with a lot of people, what they've said about how this is an urgent need. And as President Gable mentioned, there are ways to change this committee if needed. Policing and public safety is incredibly important right now, and it's a public health issue that disproportionately affects people of color. And so since there are ways to change, if there are any glaring issues, which I don't see, but some people might, I would say that the urgent need for this right now would supersede the couple of flaws that people might see. So I would urge people to support this. Thank you, and I yield my time.
Thank you, Emily. Next, please.
Next, I have Penny Edgell.
Penny?
Thanks. I'm going to leave my camera off because like you, I have lighting issues in my office. It's now dark in here. So I'm just in a little cave. So very quickly, I do want to applaud the comments of my colleagues, Ben Munson and Karen Sue Tausig. I'm going to try to be brief, respecting time. I am a faculty person. I was a former associate dean in the College of Liberal Arts. And to me, the representation of students on the proposed committee seems reasonable. Students are most often subject to police action on our campuses. They are the most often subject to police discipline on our campuses. I have been in meetings with the police chief and others when police had to come into classrooms with guns to remove students. Now, these are terribly charged situations, and I think the police acted appropriately. And I want to say that I think our police department, the MPD, acted appropriately, but they were also completely willing to understand and really take seriously the effects that their actions had on students in terms of heightening questions about feeling unsafe and questions about feeling like the level of your safety might depend on the color of your skin or your national origin or other kinds of factors that simply don't affect me as a white, full professor. I think that students have far fewer avenues to exercise administrative power in the university than the rest of us do. And so I think that actually it is quite appropriate to have this committee be represented by a number of students that actually allows for
30 seconds.
And a diversity of student viewpoints when it comes to campus safety particularly. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Penny. Next in the queue.
Next, we have Marty Faceland.
Marty?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask maybe a clarifying question, or maybe that's not even the right word, but we've heard a lot about the feedback surrounding additional consultation and things like that. And then we've also heard about the urgency of this, which I do agree with. And I'm wondering if this proposal were not to be passed, what does I'm assuming, and I could be wrong, if the conversation has already taken place of maybe a timeline where it would be appropriate to bring another proposal forward, or the timeline or expectation of additional consultation. I think that would be an important thing to consider as we are reflecting on urgency.
I'll ask Scott to reply to that, and then Carol, I'll call on you to talk about how that would work broadly. But since there's the specific, if I understand you, Marty, about this proposal itself, and then more broadly, if there were another one brought, am I following?
Well, it's more or less like if we were to not pass this one, and it seems that SEC Senate leadership are all in favor of a sort of committee of these sorts, but would like additional consultation to create what we think should be. And I'm just wondering what that timeline looks like as in urgency is so important. Sorry, thank you for.
No, thank you. My fault. So that timing question should go to Phil Bullman as chair. So Phil.
Well, let me remind everybody that the Senate Consultative Committee really wants to get something done, wants to get a safety committee or a similar governance structure done. And I totally see that possible within this academic year. The question really, I think the Senate Consultative Committee was thinking about is what gets us there faster? Some careful thinking and consultation going on, and having a committee that is really much more functional, as we set off the ground in early spring, for example? Or do we accept something now that then has to be fixed multiple times because we really haven't thought it through? Personally, I totally respect you can take either one of the two options.
And if I may, I would, speaking as the administration, I agree very much with the last sentence, the last point that Phil just made. Okay, next in the queue, please.
Next, we have James Farnsworth.
Hi, James.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you. James Farnsworth, CHD student senator from the Twin Cities campus, undergrad. My hand's been up for a while, so I've changed a whole bunch of what I want to say depending on other speakers. It's just been, out of my 4 years in shared governance, this has been the most interesting meeting I think I've been at. Anyways, a couple things. One, I wanted to thank one of the most, I don't remember their name, but one of the most recent speakers, the senator from the medical school, for your words about students. As a student, that was deeply appreciated. As a student was involved in the earlier end of creating this proposal. I think another salient point that was made that I wanted to underscore was from I see you on the screen, thanks. From a senator from PNA, I believe it was the second recent, or one of the recent senators from PNA that talked about kind of broader overall concerns about Senate committee representation. And I think doing an analysis of representation in a whole bunch of Senate committees is, and that impacts all of us, stakeholders from all the different Senates that comprise the University Senate, I'm sure would be equally interested in that conversation. So I think that's a point really well taken for those who are concerned about the representation numbers on this committee, is that there's really a broader question that shouldn't impede this from happening. As a student, I've gotten a lot of, the same number of safety alerts that everyone else has mentioned. I know students are really concerned about campus safety and look favorably upon a venue to have this discussed. As a member of the Senate Committee on Finance and Planning, where we had Chief Clark at our most recent meeting, I think it was his first appearance in front of Finance and Planning in 3 years before that. I totally see the need for a better institutional venue to have discussions about campus safety, a number of which there's a number of topics that we could be discussing right now. And then once Dr. Alexander's report comes in, I'm getting that right. So as a student, I would really encourage University Senate colleagues to pass this so we can take action today and then refine later when we need to. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Okay, I believe Gunnar Fromm is next, and he is the last speaker from the earlier statement. Gunnar?
Sorry. My name is Gunnar Fromm, and I am the vice chair of the Student Senate and the SSCC. I'm also a Duluth undergrad student. There was some concern earlier about whether or not system campuses had been consulted on this. Early June, I had received a email from Scott Petty on this with the draft, and I had provided some insight, that Duluth has its own police force and that there are many campus safety concerns that Duluth students feel as well. And that this is something Duluth would like to see as it gives a little more student insight on it. Further, I had talked with Sam Morris on this, Sam Rosemark, the student body president at Morris, and they again have their own security force on campus and campus safety things. And Morris had expressed approval of this campus safety committee as well. So I think that right there gives you two system campuses have stated that they would like to see this campus safety committee. Further, I know Crookston senators have stated before it can take upwards of a week to get access to their CCTV video feed because the CCTV data is centralized and housed on the Twin Cities campus. Now, if you're reviewing something that happened on your campus in Crookston and you have to wait a week to get video feed to see who a perpetrator is, that person, you're not going to feel very safe about that, right? Because it takes a week to get something back to you. So another campus safety concern on a system campus. So I think having a committee like this allows system campus students to voice what their concerns are on matters like this and start to see positive change on their own campuses. And I do think that this could be something good for the system campuses. Thank you. With that, I yield my time.
Thank you, Gunnar. Okay, we have hit, if I'm not mistaken, the time limit. So I believe now we call the question. This is a vote for all voting members of the University Senate. A majority of members present and voting is needed to approve the motion. So host, if you will post, please.
I don't see the option to vote. Oh, I do now.
Give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 119 ayes, 49 nays, and 9 abstentions, the motion prevails.
Thank you. Okay, the next item concerns senator responsibilities and is provided for information. The next item is a statement from the Social Concerns Committee and is presented for information. The next item is a statement from the Disability Issues Committee and is presented for information. Item 14 consists of a number of letters from governance committees to members of the administration and the Board of Regents. They are also presented for information. Item 15 is old business. There is no old business. And item 16 concerns new business. Please note that any new business will be referred to committee unless special permission is granted by 2/3 of those voting and present. Is there any new business? Hearing none, I will take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
I see a hand raised. Sam?
He may have just been sitting in the queue long enough that, okay, never mind, it went.
Okay. So is there any discussion on the motion for adjournment? All right, you want to post the poll? Okay. I'm just going to go ahead and call it. I'll do the honors and say thank you all very much for a very interesting meeting, and we are adjourned.